Hello. Test, test. Camera's on me. We ready? We good? All right, welcome everybody to the Wednesday night Broward Spirit Society live stream. And I'm joined here tonight with my amigo, Manny Pereira.
Thank you.
And before we begin tonight's talk, we're going to start with a short prayer for those who care to join from home. Tabum. Tabum and tabum. So, let's just take a moment and take a deep breath. Respira profundo. And just let everything settle. Shake off the dust from the day. And if you're in a chair, you can just let your weight settle into the chair. Just let the chair hold you up. And we just want to take a moment and elevate our vibration. Raising our vibration and inviting the good spirits to be here with us, the mentors, our guides, our guardian angels, the workers of the light, to help guide us, motivate us, and inspire us, to help us on our journey as we come tonight here with the purpose of opening our minds, opening our hearts, tilling the soil in our hearts, allowing the seeds of knowledge to be planted, that we can not just read the gospel, but we can talk about it, comment on it, practice it, and apply it in our lives. So that every day we take one more step forward on our journey of our personal evolution, of our evolution as spirits, of our evolution as citizens of this planet Earth, that we can keep always marching forward on this path of progress, that we can always follow in the footsteps of our Master, Jesus Christ, who came here so long ago to show us the way, how to love one another, how to be love, how to practice love, how to show love, how to show charity towards our neighbors, how to show tolerance, patience, benevolence, and kindness. And with each day, we can take one more step forward on this progress. So with that, we're very grateful for this opportunity that we have this space tonight, that we can come here and speak. We're grateful for the people watching from home here in Pompano Beach, in the United States, and all over the world. We're grateful that we can all connect together, that we can all be points of light no matter where we are, that we can all help make the world a brighter place. So with this spirit of gratitude, with our minds elevated, we ask for permission to begin our work this evening. So be it.
So be it. Thank you.
All right. All right. And so welcome everybody, welcome back, and welcome Manny. And so tonight we're here to talk about self-correction, right? So what do you have to say about self-correction?
Right, so...
It's not auto-correction.
No, it's not auto-correction.
Like when I'm sending a text and then I'm like, no, I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting. It's kind of similar to how auto-correct works in like a word program. Just we do it with our bodies and our mind, and a lot of times unconsciously. So the idea of it is basically when we go through our lives and we experience different things, how what we experience kind of affects our behavior, kind of how our behavior might change a little bit depending on what situation we're in, what kind of lessons we learn, and how we navigate the world, our lives through this world. One of the things that that started me thinking on this topic was that I'm kind of a person. I believe in growth, self-growth, and transforming yourself and learning new things and looking at areas that you're scared to look in to discover new things. But I've always been kind of a person that had this mentality that didn't really see what the value was in remembering things that happened in your past that maybe you might have forgotten or you might have blocked out. So I was always kind of the person like, it happened in the past. I have my own problems now and things to deal with now. I'm living my life. Why dredge up all this past history and
water under the bridge.
Yeah, water under the bridge, or it's in the past. I forgot the monkey's name in Lion King, right? Talking to Simba. He smacks him over the head and he's like, the past is in the past. Yeah. So I was always kind of a person like that, and I guess in a big way I still am, because what would be the value of remembering like a trauma from your past or something that happened in your past? But I was actually having a let me ask you that question then. Like, do you feel the same way?
Do I? No.
Or like, what's your take on it?
That it's not worth it to bring back old memories and stuff?
Yeah, like especially things that you might have like just completely forgotten about.
I have a habit of like bringing the stuff up. So, I don't do it like with other people. Like, I don't go to my parents and be like, "Oh, remember that time you yelled at me? Remember that time?" Like, I do it like with myself. I do a lot of self-reflection. But and it's funny because I've been doing a lot more of it since the pandemic started, and I have been questioning, like, am I doing this right? Like, is anything really getting better? Like I'm sort of rehashing old memories and stuff. Like, am I just staying stuck in it, or am I moving past it? So I've been kind of questioning it lately a lot.
Right. Yeah. So that's one of the big reasons to revisit those types of things. It's because you might be a lesson there to learn, or you might get some value out of it. But the thing that kind of triggered me to think about that and to think about this topic was, I was having a conversation with someone, and they were telling me that just recently, this past Thanksgiving and Christmas, they were having these kind of deeper family discussions with their mom, and what they said was that that the mom was talking about the husband, the person's dad, and she said that when we were young, that whenever the father was playing with the children and it was time to maybe go to bed, or time to clean up and go brush your teeth and take a shower and go to bed, the father would always tell the kids about the moms and say, oh, you don't have to listen to your mom, you don't have to do any of that, like, you don't have to stop playing, we can keep playing as long as we want, this and that. And the person was telling me that they grew up in this kind of culture where the father was kind of kind of growing this kind of disobedience in the kid, and
brushing
like
aside the
and kind of like brushing aside of the mom's kind of authority and all that. And they were telling me that they realized that kind of idea was still running in their brain without them even knowing it. And what they were telling me was that they realized that was the case because it was affecting like a lot of the situations that they were in, like especially like at work, whenever they would be having conversations with like their supervisors, they would kind of be like a little bit like brazen, or like kind of like little like sassy to like the like the supervisors, and never really kind of not necessarily accept authority, but kind of always like had a little bit of a rebellious kind of spirit and never really kind of wanted to play by the rules. And they were telling me, they were like, they couldn't believe this, that they learned that, and how it was such like an important part of their life. And now that they kind of not necessarily remembered that, but they were kind of reminded of what had happened when they were younger, they were able to adjust themselves so that whenever they found themselves in certain situations where there may be some kind of tension between like a supervisor or something like that, that they wouldn't they wouldn't automatically, they'd be conscious of that kind of program that was running in the back of their mind and kind of like override it, with like, and that's part of, and we do this all the time, it's part of just transforming, it's part of making yourself better, it's part of, finding out who you are and what you've been through and growing from it.
Yeah, I think when you sort of tend to, you don't want to stay stuck in the past, but it's good to like remember things sometimes, because you can sometimes spot like, oh, this is a pattern, this has been happening in my life. Like I see this pattern over and over again, and then you kind of get that self-awareness, and then you can break the pattern, because once you have that, like just a little bit of self-awareness, when you get in that situation again, you'd be like, oh, this is what happens, and this is what I usually do, and this is what usually, like the results of what I usually, so maybe I'm gonna try something different this time.
Yeah, and that's kind of the next thing that I kind of wanted to talk about. Whenever you're younger, you're very impressionable, and you have your parents there to guide you. And when of course when you're born with certain characteristics, you're born with certain traits, but what ends up becoming your personality is the whole of what you incarnated with, and the nurturing of your parents.
I think somebody told me, I had a friend that was really into NLP, neuro-linguistic programming.
Oh yeah.
And he was talking about how, I don't know what it was something ridiculous, like the first 6 months or the first 18 months of your life is when you're the most impressionable, that you'll really like, those things will get sort of like anchored into you, those ideas and concepts, really like subconsciously.
Yeah, it's so true, and even parents, you'll see the child there, but they're absorbing everything. This is a new being in the world, and they're just taking everything in. Like it's just information that you're basically trying to make sense of. So as children, we are very impressionable, and what happens is we're presented the world, and we have to sort of kind of we have to, our reality gets kind of molded by how the world is being presented to us. And our parents have a big part of that, because your parents went through the same thing. They have their own life, they had their parents, and they were instilled with certain values, and were incarnated with certain characteristics, and they have their goals for you. They want to see, usually parents want to see their kids, or guardians want to see their kids succeed in the world, so they want to mold you. It's like pruning a wild bush. You can't have it growing wild in all directions. You want it to be a certain form and shape. You want it to have manners, say please and thank you, and have certain things. You want to see them succeed in the world. So the parents always are they're very impressionable on the kid, and it is true. When they're the first 18 months, they say maybe the first 3 to 4 years is that's like the biggest period. 18 months, that's even more when you're that young. But then after about 3 or 4, that's when kind of children kind of start having more of like an identity. But still the parents are still very influential on their life. But thinking about that kind of, it reminded me of the Enneagram, and I know it's all the rage here at the center. But the Enneagram, it's this kind of personality profiling tool. It's a tool that helps you, kind of understand what your drive is, and what your focus is in life, and areas you need to work on. And one of the main foundations of the Enneagram, and a lot of other kind of personality tools, is that the Enneagram, it deals with your personality, but it's nature and nurture together. And depending on what you were presented with as a child, you kind of corrected not necessarily corrected it, but kind of some kind of an idea was forming in your brain of how to navigate the world. And this kind of came about based on what you were experiencing, but also based on what you were getting from your parents, because children are and even us now as adults, we're always seeking acceptance, especially as a child, if you're doing something and your parent likes it, you're going to keep doing it. And if you're doing something they don't like, then you're going to stop doing it.
Positive and negative rewards.
Yeah. So if you're doing, so obviously, if you know if you have certain ideas or you're acting in a certain way, and your parents aren't really receptive of that, you're going to kind of change your behavior so that way what you're doing they like. And this happens, it happens constantly. With every word that you say, the child is just so awake and just vivid and just absorbing everything that they're so receptive to the emotions and the responses from their parents that they're constantly tweaking, how they're going to navigate the world and how they're going to act just based on those responses. And that continues to happen as you continue to grow. So we're constantly kind of correcting our behavior just based on what we're getting, the feedback.
Yeah, it's making me think, as an example, I don't know if I should really talk about stuff like this, but when I was a kid, like I felt, I was the youngest child. I had an older brother and an older sister, and I felt like I was ignored as a kid. And the way I sort of corrected for that was that I started to be funny. So it's like they would ignore me, but then I said a line from a movie. It was from the movie Spaceballs. I like said it like in the middle of nowhere, like at the dinner table, and everybody started cracking up laughing. And I think that for me was like that reinforcement, like, okay, if you're funny, you'll get attention.
Yeah.
So I worked like very hard, subconsciously, not like on purpose, but I tried to be funny all the time. And even now, it's like, I don't know, sometimes it kind of came up the other day that I was talking to somebody and I felt like they were ignoring me. And I got that same kind of like feeling. And I was like, oh man, like it kind of brought me back to that. That's why it's sort of on my mind.
Yeah. And that stuff happens all the time. It's just, when I started thinking about it, it kind of just, my mind started going in all different directions. It actually reminded me of a friend, that told me that when she was younger, she could see auras, and I guess like her parents weren't really too keen on the idea. They didn't really like all that idea, and the way that she explained it to me was she would sometimes, she'd be walking or she'd be in the car in the back seat, and then she would see a person. There'll just be like a color around them. She'd be like, that person looks blue or that person looks red, and then her mom was always like, oh, that's nothing, just forget about it. Like, that's not anything important. And then eventually, after hearing that so many times and realizing that, that nobody seemingly cared about what she was seeing, she kind of just started blocking it out. So like when she got older, she actually was able to kind of like relearn that gift. But for like a long period of her youth, like she wasn't able to even, like she was just completely blocking it out. But she was also like not wanting to see it too, and not even trying to look there, in that area. And I think that happens, a lot of, this is why I think, the study of mediumship and the study of, spiritism, texts and ideas and magnetism, I think it's so important because this is just another natural aspect of our life here, on this planet. And a lot of parents, they deal with children who, especially when they're young, they have different faculties, they have different abilities. They might have dreams that come true. They might, say certain things, and the parents are like, where did that come from? Like, I don't want to hear that. Like, what is that? Like,
they make a pill for that?
Yeah, it's like, hey, what's wrong with you? Let's go to the doctor, right? So it's tough.
Yeah, if you knew about mediumship, and then somebody is saying, I hear voices, then okay, then that makes sense. But if you don't know about mediumship, you're like, oh man, my kid's schizophrenic. My kid has,
right. Yeah, and how often do you hear of kids having imaginary friends and stuff? Like, what if that was actually like an actual, like spirit that they're talking to? It's it happens all the time. But this is just another reason why I think it's so important to not be afraid of these things, and we have to open ourselves up to new ideas and things like that.
So where does that bring us with self-correction in that case?
So I'm gonna talk more about that, but so it's something that you kind of have to be mindful of it, and you kind of have to orient yourself in a way that you're kind of just aware of yourself, like what your wants and needs are. A lot of people, they're still very impressionable, and especially now, there's a lot of ideas and kind of, concepts, and people gravitate towards them. There's a lot of social justice causes that people are gravitated towards, and a lot of them are you know, have a great cause, but sometimes we get kind of obsessed, you know, about certain ideas. It could be anything, not necessarily, you know, one specific thing, but it's the idea of that kind of reminded me of kind of like a crowd mentality, or kind of like, you know, I heard once somebody say that crowds kind of create their own power, because, you know, if you have, let's say you have a speaker talking to a crowd, and that speaker is a very charismatic speaker, you know, and they have like this kind of like, you know, you see these influential speakers, you know, sometimes they have kind of this kind of like control over the crowd, but that is self-correction at work right there, because what you're doing is, if you're a great speaker, you are taking cues from the crowd, like nonstop. And some of those might even be happening without you even consciously knowing it. So you might be speaking and saying something, and then you're getting this feedback from the crowd, and all of a sudden you see somebody there's a spark in someone when you said a certain thing. So then you kind of go in that direction, and then you keep going in that direction, and you see more and more people start getting, you know, giving you this feedback, and then it's kind of like, you know, you're kind of the energy is kind of feeding off each other. Of course, the orator or the speaker is getting this energy because they kind of feel this you know, this power and this acceptance from the crowd, and the crowd is like, hey, you know, we're all thinking of the same idea, you know, and this is like great, like we're all on the same page. And it's kind of, you know, it's like the crowd is feeding off of the speaker, and the speaker is getting feedback from the crowd, and this is where you kind of, this is where it's difficult, because you have to do that work. You know, you have to kind of understand where you're coming from, and it's hard to put it into words, but these are the type of things that happen to people all the time. We have leaders and, you know, these speakers, and they just kind of have like this following. You know, this is how cults start. You know, this is how, you know, you can talk about Hitler in Nazi Germany. It's, you know, you have some normal people in the Germans, and then all of a sudden you have this very, you know, charismatic, you know, leader and speaker that's just saying the perfect things to everyone, and they're eating it up, and slowly.
And they voted for him.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
and that's one of the things they say. Like, well, he was actually like legally elected.
Right.
You know?
So it's like, I mean, like those were just regular people like anybody else, but slowly they started kind of, their orientation was kind of skewed a little bit. You know, and the idea was like, you know, all my neighbors are thinking the same thing, so if I think something different, then something must be wrong with me. And I'm sure that a lot of people were thinking that way, but this is how slowly an idea like that, based on you making these kind of corrections that aren't necessarily good or bad, they start just happening in your mind, and you compromise more and more and more, and then you find yourself in a state of what happened, you know, in World War II and many other areas.
I think about stuff like that sometimes, like when I'm at work and we're listening to the radio and we're hearing music, and I'm like, I actually kind of like some of this music that's playing. And I think about like me when I was in high school, I would have like never listened to this, and not because I didn't like it, but because I was afraid of what people would think of me if I admitted that, like, well, I kind of like this stuff, because I had to be like, you know, hardcore and like metal and stuff when I was in high school. I was like trying to like promote this image of myself to fit in with my other friends who were doing the same thing. It's like I couldn't really admit that, like, oh, I also like some of this like alternative stuff and some of this other
yeah,
know, like I'll sing a little Whitney when I'm at work, you know, just, you know, but
yeah, and that kind of happens. You know, you kind of start with the music of what your parents were listening to. Then you kind of, maybe you have some siblings, and I had an older sister, so like whatever she was listening to, I was listening to that too. And then eventually, you know, I started, you know, growing into my own alternative and music, and yeah, some rap, I guess too. But yeah, it's you know, finding your own way, finding your own path. You know, you have certain interests, and you know, you should be happy about those. You know, everyone's different. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and like as I get older, I care a lot less now about what people think about me. But
yeah.
I still enjoy, like, if I like something and other people like it too, like, well, I'm glad to. Okay, we can agree on something. You know, but it's one of those things, like, I remember one time we did this workshop here in the center where Adele was here, and he would say, okay, like there's the left side of the room and the right side of the room. And so if you like traditional Brazilian folk music, stand on the left. And if you like funk music, stand on the right. And everybody went to the left side, except this one person was like, I have to be honest, I like. But they kept like, so he said, okay, if you like this or that, and they kept going from side to side. And nobody wanted to be like, the woman didn't want to be the one standing there alone admitting that like she actually liked the thing that nobody else liked. But then she's just, I have to be honest.
Yeah, and I think things like that, just on a greater scale, are kind of happening more and more. People are more willing to stand up and just say, you know what, like, because I mean, if you're going to show somebody something and 90% of the room agrees with one thing, and you're in that small minority, you almost feel like obligated to be part of the minority, because like you almost feel like something's wrong with the way you're thinking, or it's almost maybe even like like a humbling thing. You say, maybe I'm wrong in what I'm thinking, so maybe I should just humble myself and join the rest of the crowd. So I guess it comes down to being true to yourself, not giving in to the whims of others. Not being, just realizing when you're being manipulated, and just trying to find your own path. And an important thing is always ask questions. If something doesn't make sense, you should ask questions. Like, don't just assume things. Don't just follow the crowd. And that's another reason why this is so hard for people, because we're born with certain ideas, going back to, what we were talking about, your parents kind of, molding you in a certain way. And when you've built this kind of reality and this kind of idea of the world in your mind, and then, you kind of feel safe there. You don't want to step out of that and say, hey, let me see what meditation is about. Let me see what, reincarnation's about. It's like, well, I already have my set box that I fit nicely into, so I don't want to mess any of those walls up, because then everything might come crashing down, right? And a lot of people are afraid of that. But this is exactly what we need to do.
Yeah, it reminds me that scene there's a movie, I Heart Huckabees, where the guy.
I still haven't seen that.
You gotta see that. Because it's a movie all about sort of asking deep questions to ourselves. It's a ridiculous movie, but it's kind of a metaphor. But he keeps telling the same story over and over again, because people love this story about how he met a celebrity and how he sort of like fooled the celebrity and got one over. And he tells the story over and over, and they play it back for him, like August 13th. You're telling the story again, like August 15th. Here, over and over again, he's telling the same story.
It's like Groundhog Day.
And they're like, who's this guy saying that? And they're like, who are you? And he's like, well, I'm myself. But he says, how am I not myself? And they're like, that's a good question. They go, how am I not myself? He keeps saying it over, how am I not myself? And it turns into like this mantra form where he like breaks down his whole reality, and it's kind of funny to watch it. But I always think about, how am I not myself? Like when I'm showing up, going to work, going through the motion, like on autopilot or whatever, like, am I really being myself, or am I just projecting something?
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of something else too. I was listening to this psychologist talk, and what he was saying about his own life was that sometimes he was saying things and he was repeating these ideas and these concepts, but in the back of his mind, something was telling him that this is not you. Like these aren't your ideas. You're just repeating things that you've heard that sound good to you. And then kind of how he explained it, he said, stop saying things that make you feel weak. Stop saying things that that aren't truthful, or don't make you feel like, that make you feel like less than who you are. And he said that you might end up getting rid of 90% of who you were before, but at least what you have left is what's authentic. At least what you have left is what is who you are, and something that you can be proud of, and something that you can pursue and grow on that. And then people will see that too, and it'll be this authenticity that you live your life with, that sometimes we're scared to cross that line. It's safety and security, and then the unknown, right? Stepping over that boundary, embracing your shadow, asking those questions.
And sometimes if you people will talk about on the internet, be like, oh, this guy back in 2010 he said this, and now it's 2020.
Right.
He said this, like he changed, like so he's inconsistent. And then so
Yeah.
some people would say like, hey, look, like I learned a lot in the last 10 years, and I don't feel the same way I did back then. So like I don't need to say the same things I said like when I was in high school or when I was later on in my 20s, or now I'm getting older. It's like I can change and I can grow, and like now I know more than I know back then. I wouldn't say the same thing I said back then.
Right.
So it's like being inconsistent isn't like don't get like fall into that trap of having to be consistent, like having to say the same things over and over again. Like we can change and not like somebody came here and gave a lecture one time. And they were talking about how some people will say like, oh, I have no regrets in my life. And it's like, really? You have no regrets? Like you've never made a mistake before? You have nothing, there's nothing you'd want to change if you could go back and do it over again? And she's like, I have tons of regrets. But
They were all learning experiences.
Don't get so caught up in that pride. Like that's something that people like to say, I have no regrets, but it's it's like I've learned like a lot, They say that wisdom comes from experience, and experience comes from making mistakes.
Great advice.
Yeah.
I really think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that actually reminds me of about when you were talking about people changing, how one person says one thing at this point in their life and they say something else, and people say, oh well, why did you backtrack, or why did you go against your word? And the moon changes. People don't complain about the moon, right? Some people do, I guess.
Yeah, I do. Sometimes.
But no, I'm making that as a joke, kind of. The moon is constantly changing. The sun is relatively stays the same, but they both do their thing. They're both important. But about celebrities, sometimes celebrities find themselves in a bad spot. They kind of they have this identity, they have this persona, they have a base, and if you have certain ideas that people are, that they know you for, and then you start saying something different, then of course, some people are going to be like, hey, what's going on? It's like, but they're human like anyone else, But unfortunately, a lot of celebrities kind of find themselves in kind of like this rigid kind of box, and they have to act a certain way, otherwise everything is just going to fall apart. And yeah, it's just interesting, having that fame and fortune. There's a lot of good things that come with it, but it also is a lot kind of like walking a tightrope at the same time.
It's quite a trial.
Yeah, it is.
And there's a guy on the radio now that's got this song. I don't know if I'm gonna say it, but he keeps saying like, "Oh, I'm so lonely," and it's a song. He's like, I'm so lonely, but it's like, okay, you've been famous since you were a little kid. You have like all this money, and it's really hard to feel sorry for the guy. But then, like having read some of the stuff in the Spirit's book and the Gospel where they talk about how having money and having all that stuff is such a trial. It's like a test, and few people ever really pass this test. It's like I'm thinking like I should feel more like sorry for the guy. I should pray for him and stuff like that. But I'm just like I don't feel sorry for him at all.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just being honest, just being really, really honest. But like I'm like okay, I know that's something like I should change. But I think I'm just saying like what a lot of people would be thinking like who cares if you're lonely? Like you have all that money, but we know that like having money and having it doesn't bring happiness.
Right.
And that's a tough that's a tough trial because really now you have this image like you have this sort of like statue built up. How are you going to like break that down and start over again? Yeah.
And that kind of brings me to the next thing that I was going to talk about, and maybe we can close with this, but there was something interesting that I found in the Spirit's book that kind of deals with this same kind of topic of how we correct our behaviors and kind of finding your way and knowing yourself. This is from book number 4, Hope and Consolation in the Spirit's book, and this is the chapter Earthly Joys and Sorrows. So the question here, number 928, that was posed to the spirits was, by our natural aptitudes, God shows each of us our special vocation or duty or interest in this world. Are many of the problems of life attributable to a failure to follow that vocation or that interest or duty? That's what the word vocation means. And the reply that they got was this: that is true. Parents, through pride or greed, often force their children to deviate from the path set for them by nature. So this is a pressure that a lot of people experience. especially in some other cultures, like you hear a lot about it in Japan, you know, how the suicide rate is so high in some of those places because there's such a pressure put on children when they're young just to
conform.
Conform and succeed and be successful and be a certain job and so you know we're programmed with this, you know, kind of from when we're young just to be in this rat race our whole life. You know, just and you see it happen because a lot of times people they'll follow careers just based for the money that they're going to make, not really their interest. When I was younger, about 16 years old, someone gave me some advice, and this was a random person. I don't even remember who their name or anything. So it's an anonymous quote, but he said, don't worry about the future. He said, do what you love, and the money will come later. And that's kind of always stuck with me because it's kind of something that I kind of believe in. You know, I went to college and I was around friends and they were always talking about, well, I'm going to study this because I'm going to end up making this much money when I graduate. And the next guy's like, oh yeah, well when I graduate I'm going to make, you know, 20,000 more than that. That's the starting. You know, it's like for me it's like, well, you know, I mean, are you going to be, you know, are you going to be happy in that? The follow-up to the answer to that question was this, and it kind of goes along those lines. Assuming a position outside one's intellectual scope is one of the most frequent causes of failure and disappointment. Lack of aptitude for the career one has set out to follow is a never-ending source of disappointment. Often pride prevents people who fail in one career to seek a humbler vocation or job. They are frequently tempted to commit suicide in order to escape what they view as humiliation. If a sound moral education elevates them above the stupid prejudices of pride, they are never at a loss to earn a living. So you might be successful, but you might be miserable. And a lot of famous people who have a lot of money, they say this too. They say you can have all the money in the world, but it still doesn't make you happy. So this just goes back to, you know, just being true to your nature. And you know, if you have an interest, you know, don't be afraid to follow it. Don't be afraid to go down that road. You may be secure now, but what are going to be the consequences, you know, 5-10 years from now? They'll definitely be a lot worse than you making a change today. And following your heart, you know, it may not be as much money, it may not be as glamorous, but you may be fulfilled inside. And that means different things to different people, but if you can find something that gives you a feeling of fulfillment and joy and happiness, then I would say money is secondary. Mm-hmm. I don't know if most people agree, but that's
well,
that's how
you don't
I feel.
have to conform to what they think.
Yeah.
That's what I learned tonight.
Yeah.
So yeah, I heard. I was listening to a interview with Patton Oswalt, famous comedian and actor, I guess, and he was talking about his early days in comedy, stand-up comedy, that he went to a club and he did his set, and that somebody else did a set and they didn't really do so well. The crowd didn't really react. He was trying to tell the jokes and it just wasn't really working. But the thing was, the guy was saying something that he felt it was true to him. And so he was saying, like, I've seen this scene over and over again, because the guy got off his set and the manager from the club, like the manager's husband, kind of came over and took the guy and tried to give him what he thought was really great advice. He said, listen, you know, don't try to tell jokes like that. Tell jokes that people want to hear, and tell them like stuff that, you know, like try to, you know, be more likable by the crowd. And the guy is saying, like, this is the worst advice I've ever heard anybody like give a comedian, you know, like don't just be yourself, like try to, you know, be somebody that people like. And he's like, that was just the worst, like, career killing advice. He's like, but he's like, these people that say stuff like that, they mean well. They really mean, like, they think that they're really doing you a favor, saying, like, play it safe, you know, just do what everybody likes, you know, go along with it. And, you know, but what he's saying is, like, he went his own way. He was, you know, it's kind of like the people who really make it in certain areas like that, and not just famous people, you know, like in his case, but just about anybody, is like they're really true to themselves and to their inclination, like
doing their own thing.
Yeah, like especially with comedy, you know, like observational comedy and stuff, like just like really just telling you the world that they see it, but it's funny to us, you know, and
Yeah.
and it's so, and it's not like they, and the ones that are kind of like playing it safe and doing what everybody else is doing, like they sort of fall to the wayside, you know, and the ones that really make it are the ones that really just stick to their vision and see it through. But that's the thing, is like you have to fall down a lot more times before you actually like make it.
Yeah, and it's, you know, and things like that, like, you know, that guy was dealing with his manager, and maybe he didn't want to follow the advice, so obviously his manager isn't going to be happy. Same thing happens when your parents, when they expect certain things from you or to follow a certain career, and you say, well, you know what, I kind of don't want to do that, you know, I'm not really interested in that, and they'll say, oh, well, you know, you won't be as secure as if you do this job. Well, you say, well, I'm following what I want to do. You know, that's what you got to do. You got to follow your heart.
A few years ago, actually, like I was working as a mechanic, and the original the recession from 2008, 2009 hit, and I lost my job, and I ended up like having an opportunity to go back to school, and I went back to college for a couple of years, and my dad said like, why are you gonna go to school? Like, you're a mechanic. Like, what's this gonna do? What's your end game? Like, what are you gonna do? You know, and because he didn't really like believe in me, and actually because of that, I didn't go to school for like a whole year. I like just waited like a year and I didn't go back. And after a year, it became really obvious to me that like this is what I needed to do. So I went back to school and like started going to classes, and I was getting like straight A's. You know, and then I showed him my report card, you know, like not that I needed to show, I was already in like almost 30, but I was showing him like look, and you know, I think that kind of like shut him up a little bit, because he's like, oh, he's really good at this, you know. And it's kind of like, and it wasn't really, for me, it wasn't about the money like that I might make if I get a degree or whatever, you know. It was about like the experience of it.
Right.
What I got out of it. It's really hard to like explain it and justify it to somebody else who's just looking at numbers and looking at things like that. But for me, it meant a lot, and it really changed my life. And like it's definitely a turning point in my life. And it's just like you said, like, thank God I didn't listen to the advice that I got about playing it safe and just going, like, just keep going the way you're going and just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and like you said, it's hard to like explain what you were feeling when you did that, or to, you know, especially to your father, like how to justify it, because you know, it wasn't his decision to make, it was your decision to make, and that was what you wanted to do. And it wasn't a right decision or a wrong decision. It was just something you felt like you needed to do, and then you do it, you know.
I could feel it in my jellies.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah.
So.
That's the feeling. That's the feeling you're looking for.
You know. And somebody said to me last week, we were having a conversation with somebody. He said, "How do you know what you know?" And I've been thinking about that a lot. But at that time, like, I knew this is what I need to do.
Yeah. Even if it was a wrong thing to do, at least you got that out of the way, and you say, "Hey, now I won't have to wonder about this anymore." And then you still learn something from the experience. So it's a win-win. You realize you don't want to do that, and then you learn something from the experience. Mm-hmm. So if you want to learn how to swim, just jump in the water.
So that's good. Well, I want to say it was probably about time we should wrap things up. This has been a great talk. I had a good time. I love hearing my voice. You know? Everybody knows that, and it's good to hear. I'm glad you thought of this topic, because there's a lot. We could probably sit here and talk about it for another like 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
But well, I won't. But for the people watching from home, if you like this kind of talk, if you like this kind of format, please let us know in the comments on YouTube or on Facebook, so we know like what we're doing right. You know, if we should change anything up. We're thinking about having maybe more talks like this with, you know, different people. I think it's more interesting than just having just a palestra, but you have sort of the random element of a second person that has no idea what they're talking about to kind of ask questions, you know. Or it doesn't have to be that way, but that's how I feel. But I enjoy it. I think it's more interesting to watch, like, than just a regular, you know, palestra, you know. But please let us know what you think in the comments, and really appreciate it. So, if we can, do you want to pray or should I pray?
I'll go ahead.
I don't know if you want to do paper, rock, scissors, and.
It's all right. I'll just jump right in.
So thank you, everyone, and I'll turn it over to my, I don't know what to call it.
Yeah.
To Manny.
So just real quick, we are still doing meditations on Tuesdays. I believe it's at 6:30 now. We still do the food drive on Saturdays. So if you want some food and you want to support the center, please help us out on Saturdays. The yard sale is going to be on February 13th, Saturday the 13th. It's the second Saturday of this month. So if you can help us out with that or come by and buy anything, that would also help the center out too. And of course, we have some different study groups. Some of the information on some study groups has come out. Some of it is still in the works. So we'll let you know as soon as we find out anything about those, especially the English ones, since this is Wednesday. And yeah, I think that's most of the announcements there. So nothing really has changed. And of course, the center is still closed for now, and we will promptly let everyone know once we open, when we do. So again, yeah, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Steve, for the help with the talk. Yeah, I agree. I enjoyed this, and it kind of brings a different dimension and aspect to the whole talk. So I enjoyed it. So thank you for that. And now I'd like to invite everyone for a closing prayer, and we can close for the evening. So with a feeling of gratitude, let us be thankful for everything that we have. Let us be thankful for the people in our lives, everything we're experiencing, all the challenges that we face, new opportunities to learn and grow. Let's embrace these with the best possible attitude. None of us have all the answers, but together and through our own work, our own progress, and our own learning, we proceed forward together as one human family, learning and growing, evolving, experiencing new things, and moving towards a brighter future. There is always work to be done. Sometimes the work is not easy, but embracing those challenges, getting out of your comfort zones, asking for help from those around you, your family, your friends, your coworkers, communicating with them. This is how we grow. This is how we grow with each other. This is how we understand each other, and we begin to understand that so many people are going through so many of the same things. Everyone is unique in their own way, with their own family dynamics, but a lot of these themes are common among everyone. And even though it may feel like we are on individual islands isolated from everyone else, all it takes is the reaching out of a hand, the asking for help, asking a question, communicating, and just opening up your heart without judging, without any kind of projection or expectations, and experiencing life for what it is, experiencing people for who they are, and of course trying to find your own path and orientation there, and navigating everything. But slowly we understand each other, and we understand that through constant support, through constant learning, we evolve and we grow, and this process continues, and we transform ourselves individually and as a larger family. So again, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you everyone who was able to join us tonight. And with that, we end the work of tonight. And so be it. Thank you.